We're live. Yo, yo. Thanks for joining us on our second stream, focusing on Mr. Run and Jump and the games of Graphite Lab. This is going to be a fun one. I've got some buddies here with me. I've got John Mikula, and I've got Phil Snowman. Why do you always use Snowman as your last name, Phil? You know that I have issues with your last name, but thanks for joining.
Snowbarger.
It is not. It's Snowbarger. I'm gonna say it that way every time. But at any rate, we're gonna have some fun today. It's I've enjoyed last Friday's stream. That was a lot of fun, and this one's gonna be some more fun times too. So without further ado, maybe we should get into some introductions. I said the two other guys with me earlier in a minute ago, but I am Matt Raithel. I own and operate Graphite Lab. I was also the EP on Mr. Run and Jump, and that's just a little bit about me. John, you want to say hello and remind everybody who you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm John Mikula. I was on last week's stream. I'll probably be on next week's stream too, but I was a game director on Mr. Run and Jump. But typically, I'm a programmer at Graphite Lab. But this one was special. I got to lead design and direct this one. So, that's it for me. What about you, Phil?
I'm Phil Snowbarger, not Snowbarger. But I've been with Graphite since 2020. I'm artist and animator. So I was the lead artist on Run and Jump, and also our previous game Combinera, which you can see in the background of Matt's little window there, if he's up there.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So I wanted to start a little bit talking about how the focus of this stream today is going to be a little bit about the art of Mr. Run and Jump. That's why we asked Phil to join. And so, Phil, would you maybe just rewind a little bit and talk just about how you got connected with Graphite Lab in the first place? Maybe just a few bits about those kind of early days. And then I'll hammer you with a few more questions related to like Combinera perhaps, and then we'll get into some Run and Jump. How's that sound?
Totally. Yeah, so I first met Matt whenever I was a student, actually. So I was taking classes at Maryville that Matt was instructing, and sort of got introduced that way. So I think the first class I took with you was probably actually video game history, which was a pretty fun class where we got to, talk about the history of video games. And I think that's actually where I first was introduced to John, and also Run and Jump as a project in general, because John came in and did a little demo there. So this goes like pretty far back in the timeline there, which is kind of interesting to think about now.
See, John, I told you it was important for you to come and talk about the Atari. Ha! See, putting people together.
I forgot I used to do that because, it was video game history, and then whenever Matt would get to the 2600 era, he knew I was working on, Mr. Run and Jump started as an Atari 2600 like homebrew like side project, and so he would bring me in and I'd talk about how games are made on the 2600 and how that tech works behind the scenes and the limitations of the hardware, and I had a whole like hour-long spiel or whatever, and then people would come up and play, the classic version of Mr. Run and Jump. But those are fun times.
It was great to have, and I didn't even know some of that stuff. Like, we'll get into that on a different stream, but just like how graphics were even produced, and I thought that was fascinating for students like you, Phil, to learn. Is that in the very early days, this wasn't pixels and PNG files. Like, it was a very technical process in the early days. Even though there's a lot of tech involved now, for sure, but a lot different way of how things were made. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Keep going, Phil. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a fun time. We kind of went through the different eras like John was talking about. And we would always have like at least one or two games from that era that we would play. Everyone would just like go up and we would try and beat each other's high scores and that sort of thing. And And then eventually, I took some more classes with Matt, motion graphics, learning After Effects and animation and stuff like that. And then just continuing to take other art classes on the side, since my degree was in interactive design. And one of the requirements for that degree is that we do an internship at some sort of studio. And one night we were having our, I guess, every semester, Maryville would have a game night where people just sort of bring up all their consoles. We would set up TVs in the design building, and everyone's just sort of running around playing video games, whether that's Smash or, Wii Sports or something like that. There's lots of different things going on. But this was the one at the end of the second semester, and Matt approached me and basically recommended that I apply for the internship at Graphite Lab, so that they still had a spot open for their intern team. And so I went ahead and did that, interviewed there shortly after, and then spent the summer doing an internship at Graphite Lab, doing my first Unity projects, which was really exciting for me because I'd always been kind of interested in Unity, but never really took a deep dive into it, especially not finishing any sort of game project that I'd ever started. Lots of just following short tutorials online and, getting a character sort of running around a room, but not really any real gameplay.
Yeah.
So I think getting that as like my first taste of like working with a team, and also being able to just focus on purely the art side of things, and having those dedicated roles of like, okay, we have a programmer who's handling all the code, we have a designer who's handling all the levels and how those things sort of work. I thought that was super cool, because before in my head it was like you just had to do everything, and it was a lot, and it was overwhelming at times whenever I was trying to do those projects on my own.
Sure.
And so I think that opened my eyes up to the possibilities of like, when you're actually working in a team that's built to do something like this, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's things that come along with that too. There's communication, and there's a lot of like synchronization, and that's something that we'll talk about today, is like how the two of you consistently communicated and synced with each other. Because man, when you're making something this big, I mean, you need a lot of hands, a lot of people rowing the boat, so to speak, to move it forward. So yeah, the communication's pretty key. Awesome. Well, talk a little bit about the first game, Combinera. Talk about how that came together, and then we'll segue a little bit in just a few minutes into some run and jump stuff specifically.
Yeah, so I'm primarily an artist, but I've also, done a little bit of programming here and there, so I like to mess around with that on the side, and I'm always trying to do stuff in my free time to sort of try and expand my skill set and continue growing, whether that's on the programming side or the art side. So one of my friends, Jacob, and I decided to enter a game jam, because I was kind of trying to offload some of those programming responsibilities, because that's the part that I'm least interested in. So I was trying to get him to learn how to code a little bit. So we decided that one of the best ways to do that would be to enter a game jam and really just find a project to try and complete from start to finish, something small that we could, just grind out in like a weekend. So we ended up entering a game jam and creating the prototype for what would eventually become Combinera, which was just a little puzzle game for the Brackeys game jam. And the idea was that you control multiple characters all at the same time, and you sort of have to utilize the environment to sort of combine those together. But I think that the visual style of that game, sort of helped with some learning, and also served as a little bit of inspiration for the direction that Run and Jump ultimately ended up going. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, working on that game and describing that game, Combinera, for so long, and I was always like timid, being like, well, you're kind of moving around these balls, and like what you want to do is you want to get the balls together. I always felt like goofy describing that one, and that game was out and amazing and well reviewed, and it wasn't until like a month after the game was out where I was like, they're dots, we should connect the dots. It would have been a good, like, easy to describe, move the dots around and connect the dots. But I don't know. My good ideas are usually a day late and a dollar short.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
There we go.
So
For
awesome.
the sequel.
For the sequel, what is the sequel? Like combinera is a Swedish term for combine. What is combine again in Swedish? I don't know.
It's a good question. We'll have to look it up.
What's connect the dots in Swedish?
In Swedish, yeah. We will just absolutely destroy our US-based SEO with titling the sequel.
No doubt.
But speaking of a game that has tremendous SEO, a game about running and jumping, let's move our attention there, shall we? All right, Phil and John, Mr. Run and Jump. John, you want to give maybe the 30-second kind of prequel to the game for anybody joining us for the first time or kind of knows about the game but needs that 30-second kind of reminder? What's Mr. Run and Jump, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the visuals are developed.
Yeah, sure. So Mr. Run and Jump is it's a fast-paced precision platformer, kind of in the style of something like Celeste, or like a Super Meat Boy that has like one-hit kills and kind of a fast-paced kind of difficulty, I don't know, style of gameplay like that. I'm really butchering this, 30-second description, but
you're gonna have to describe the game 5,000 more times.
You're telling me, right? But
you got some.
But you play as the titular Mr. Run and Jump, kind of an abstract spirit of platforming, who inhabits the realms of color and luminescence, is kind of the land that we are in right now. We're in the violent world, and you have your pet dog Leap, who has run deep into the realms. He's hopping into portals. You're kind of chasing after him, and also there's the primary antagonist, the Void, has manifested to life and is now consuming the realms of color.
And we haven't really jumped into the Void all that much. We should do that on a future stream too.
Did I reveal too much?
Not
Maybe
at all.
Stream exclusive. There's a Void in this game. Watch out.
Awesome. All right, Phil. So I'm bouncing around, and I'm gonna kind of go through like we'll call them the key three. I think Mr. Run and Jump's visually very unique. I kind of see it in three, maybe four places. We've got the character and the animations of the main character. We've got the environments, and then I'll say kind of interface and special effects. Because the interface in this game is pretty simple, but like the special effects and all the delightful glowies and stuff, I know was quite an undertaking for you. So let's talk first about Mr. Run and Jump. It's derived from an Atari 2600 style graphics. So when you're trying to transcribe that into a modern presentation, how do you start? How do you go through that process?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's also not something that you necessarily have anything as a point of reference outside of that original art, where it's like there are other games where the character has, more of a real world counterpart, right? But it's like just because of the graphical limitations of the hardware, it's rendered by however many pixels or whatever. But this is a little different of a situation because it's not like Mr. Run and Jump is a soldier or a knight or something like that, where it's like we have like real world reference, and so whenever you have the ability to create assets with more detail, like what that's supposed to look like. Whereas like Mr. Run and Jump is a very abstract character and unique design. So sort of kind of trying to stay true to that and just focus on like those prominent features, like the head being the main one, obviously, that kind of sticks out literally and figuratively. So I think just trying to respect that original design and treating it as if it were, kind of this like pseudo lore that we have of the game, where it's like the 2600 is like this lost Atari classic, and if it was being remade for like a modern console. So imagining just sort of like the evolution of that character.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna pop it over to John. John, Mr. Run and Jump has a very unique head. What is going on with? Tell me about like when you first made the. It's not a sprite, right? Because the Atari original one is this complicated color clocks process. But like, where did his silhouette come from?
Truly, yeah, like Matt, you're right. Like it's not so much like you're cracking open Photoshop and like painting pixels. The art's handled a little bit differently than that. I won't go into too much detail, but it does get segmented into little like blocks, sort of. So you can kind of plan things out kind of as pixels, but
yeah,
they're not necessarily squares. They're like a different metric. They wind up being a little bit like more rectangular than normal pixels are. But anyways, I had set up a Photoshop document, and I had kind of the dimensions of what the character was going to be, according to kind of the limitations of the the 2600 hardware. And I just kind of started scribbling until I had something I kind of liked. Like what happened first was I scribble, and I kind of had like a little like shape, and it had like kind of a doughy body and kind of like, little like pudgy little legs on it. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cute. I like that. And then I was like, I was looking around like at other like 2600 games to see what they were doing. And Matt, you'll like this. I was actually looking at E.T.
Yeah.
I saw like E.T. like that elongated
one of the best 2600 games of all time. One of the best. I hope that shows up in a clip, because I will put that on my tombstone and I will defend it until the day I die. Proceed, sir. Continue.
Utter insanity. Well, one of these streams will have to be you like justifying that opinion, because it's insane. But no, honestly, I got no beef with ET. But it does have like, because of like ET's like neck and like head and body and stuff like that, like it gives him kind of this elongated kind of shape, and I'm like, that's kind of good. Like what I liked about it was it's like a real clear indication of which direction the player is facing.
Sure.
So I'm like, it's kind of cute. It's like a I don't know. I call it a snout. Like it's just like a big, it's his nose or whatever. But so ultimately, yeah, I was just kind of like playing around with, with a paint program until I had something that I don't know, that kind of resonated with me.
Nice.
And yeah, like Phil was saying, like you'll play something like Yar's Revenge, and it's like, you turn the game on, and it's like, these colored pixel blobs like moving around, and it's a very abstract, experience, and you don't really, it's hard to discern what's necessarily happening. But then you look at the box art, and it's like, oh, these are like bugs in space or whatever.
Sure.
So for a while I was like, oh, well, can I make this little character like something, and kind of play on that, where it's like, oh, actually, yeah, he's like a spaceman, and like the snout is like his space helmet somehow. And ultimately I decided it was more charming to have it be like, here's just this little guy, and this is just kind of what he looks like,
For sure.
So he doesn't represent something like he's not like a facsimile of an actual thing in real life. Yeah. He's just his own little shape.
That's my challenge word. So, Kyle, I will give that justification at some point. You'll have to stay tuned for that justification. Doesn't take long, but there are roughly 6 things in my argument that I will preach to judge and jury at some other time. All right, so Phil, we've got this Atari inspiration. You're not building it in the technical way. So we're looking at Mr. Run and Jump just idling here. How are you building what I see right now? Like, are you using Photoshop? Or are you using, how are you building that and getting that real fluid, kind of like flexible look to everything we're seeing?
Yeah, so it's a combination of Photoshop and After Effects. So getting some of those smooth transitions between shapes, like when you see the idol, there's a little bit of bend in the arms that are kind of nice, rather than having like a rigid structure. So there's kind of a couple different approaches you can take whenever you're building a character like this. You can either build the rig inside of the engine and do all of your animations in there, or you can do an external approach, which is the approach that I used for Mr. Run and Jump. And so all of his animations are, unique frame by frame animations. And, that was also helpful. The place where Photoshop comes in is some of those overlapping lines on the character during different frames are, those are hand drawn in over the top of the silhouette that was animated in the After Effects file.
So awesome. And what about we've got like glows and other things like that. Are those developed in the same way, or are some of that coming from like the engine layer versus the original painted sprite?
Yeah, so all of the glow is running through just a post-processing effect inside of Unity that we have different sort of versions for each of the worlds. So to sort of accentuate the different colors and get them looking the way that we wanted to for each of the different colors. But yeah, so nothing super special for the glows. It's sort of just like a uniform thing that gets applied over everything in the game. But for like the smaller effects, like the particles and the little sparks on the wall slides and the trail behind you when you're running, those are all different sort of systems that are working inside of the engine, and those are unique.
Nice. This is
how is it? Here, I got a question. How is it working? Like, because you're doing like the sprite work in something like Photoshop and After Effects, but then like all the post-processing layers that get applied in Unity. How is it like balancing, like flipping between those two programs? Like, is it like tremendously? Does it like slow things down, or is it like not too bad? Or like how is just that process?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's ways that you can sort of speed things up for yourself. Unity does let you use just Photoshop files, which makes it a little speedier. So you don't have to keep on like re-exporting and importing an image. You can just sort of like make those edits to your Photoshop file, save it, and then sort of just, alt tab back into the engine and sort of see what's going on and what those effects look like. But yeah, there is an interesting balance between making things in a different, software that doesn't have all of the effects that you get to see in the final product of the game. And then, sort of seeing how that gets altered whenever you do finally get your assets into the engine. And that's just sort of one of those things that you get more and more used to the longer that you work on a project. You kind of know what to expect whenever you're generating certain assets. So it's like, I know what this is roughly going to look like with the post-processing put on, now that I'm like more familiar and I've, made more.
You got like your third eye open that can see the world
right
in glows and shader effects.
Definitely.
I imagine, it's a lot of like, this line I drew is actually too thick. It's blowing out the image too much. Like, when you go back and thin it out. And,
totally. And one of those things that I like to do is to make everything as editable as possible. So a lot of the sprites are just like a white image that can be tinted inside of the editor. So that way it allows us a little bit more control as far as like the nuance of different colors and things like that without having to bounce between different software. So that's something that I like to focus on whenever I'm making stuff.
It is fun to see, like, if you go into Unity and, like, maybe we'll do it one of these streams, but if you go in and you just turn off the post-processing effect and you just see, like, you see the game for what it really is and how, like, dim and, just how different it does look. It's pretty interesting.
It'd be hilarious if it was like all the graphics are like the AI make Homer Simpson look like a real person. Like, you turn off all the post-processing and, like, Mr. Run and Jump's just a middle-aged, dude sitting there like a pompadour haircut, and yeah.
It's like I don't know.
Maybe we'll expansion.
It's actually
DLC.
it's actually a full 3D world. Step one is you create you first step you draw ahead, and then you erase some details, and then bing bang boom, there you go. You got Mr. Run and Jump.
Bing bang boom.
It's like how SpongeBob draws a circle, basically.
Exactly.
It is. It's not necessarily a pompadour, but it could. Looking in chat, Mr. Run and Jump can be whatever you want Mr. Run and Jump to be. I've envisioned Mr. Run and Jump in many ways. I would encourage all of you to imagine Mr. Run and Jump in many ways. That's funny.
It is fun. We do want to do an art contest at some point. I fully expect, because that's kind of the fun thing about a character like this, is he could really be anything.
Right.
Just how simple the shape is. As long as you got something with like a big snout like that.
There it goes.
That can be a Mr. Run and Jump.
All right, so Phil, this is the first time that I think we're showing 1.3 on stream. I may have done just a little bit of it last time, but let's kind of move into a bit of the environment development. So we've got these realms of color. Each realm takes on a core color characteristic of the rainbow. We're looking at Violet World, obviously. And as you're developing the world, like, what's your process there? How are you choosing to, focus on like flowers, bushes, trees, and like a Violet World like this, the clouds, the layering, even the background effects? Can you talk through that process a little bit?
Yeah, I think, one of the primary things was we sort of had this idea of, the realms are getting more dangerous as you progress through them, right? And so the environment is kind of a reflection of that, where like you're starting in the first world, that's the easiest. So it's a more peaceful environment with the flowers, the trees, garden, evoking those sort of feelings. And as we progress through the different worlds, eventually people will see, the scenery starts to change. And things are a little different, a little less friendly feeling than initially at the outset. So I think just sort of keeping that in mind whenever I make those decisions on like what's going to be placed in the environment, like knowing what our sort of theme is, where we're at in the game, all those sorts of things.
Me dying like 10 times in a row just there reminded me that I did this last week. My punishment is now coming back, so we have seen this stage. Very cool. All right, so talk a little bit about the development of the assets, though, because you're not actually, unlike Mr. Run and Jump, you're not like building these assets and drawing the whole level out yourself. That's actually getting assembled by others. So talk about kind of the piece production, perhaps.
Yeah, so everything has to be very modular and work in lots of different scenarios to allow our level designers to, express themselves in whatever way they wanted to for the level, create interesting scenarios and obstacles. So, we have like our base tile set, which is just the ground that you walk on, the things that, spikes get placed on, the enemies are on. And so you have to make a whole map that sort of fits together and allows for just about any possibility you can imagine with a seamless connection. So there's tons of like individual little squares that have these different angles of connections on them. So that way we get that sort of seamless border around the edge of every platform.
And so like if I'm looking like at a screen like this one, we're breaking these down, I guess, figuratively or literally speaking, into like really small, almost like Lego-like blocks. And those then get assembled in the engine, essentially, but you're making the blocks and then others are assembling.
Yep. So basically, there's sort of a map, and then we generate what's called a rule tile, which basically is just a set of directions that tells the editor which image it's supposed to display depending on which tiles are next to it. So it knows that if there's a tile here and that there's empty space all around it and there's tiles over here, this is a corner. So it's supposed to display the corner image. So that allows the designers to just go in and paint freely without having to like painstakingly go in and make sure that, they're using the correct image to line up all the different edges and everything.
And so the original classic game, though, John, is quite flat, right? It's just focused on those two shades of positive, negative space. So as Phil's developing the more elaborate style clouds and gardens and stuff, how are you, like, what was that review process like, or what really was, I guess, how did some of these things come together in your mind as you're reviewing kind of the work in progress? Like, was there a lot of feedback between you and Phil as you're developing this, or was it a lot of like just freestyling these? How did that process go for you, John?
Honestly, like, it's like we when we settled on kind of the level themes, and kind of the overall kind of art direction, for the most part, I could kind of just let Phil cook, and he just largely kills it. Occasionally there's, like, I remember having, there'd be a few issues, right, where it's like there'll be like things, like the big things I would worry about are like gameplay centric things, like or like things like, you can't make the frog this shape because it's going to look ambiguous in this gameplay scenario, or like that's just a made up scenario, or it's like, hey, like, we have this enemy, it can't have this theming, it's going to be used across all the world, so it needs to kind of have a more universal look, so it doesn't look out of place in XYZ, so really, I kind of, like, my approach is I do like to let our guys are talented, right? I think Phil's a tremendous artist, and for the most part, I didn't have to critique him all that much or force him to redo a bunch of stuff. It would just be occasionally things here or there, would again just for those like gameplay reasons, like.
Sure. Nice, awesome. Phil, we're really only showing Violet World on these streams, kind of leading up to some of the other announcements that we have. But out of all of the worlds, do you have one that came together the fastest, or one that gave you like the most trouble trying to find its theme or style, or its real, like, getting it to tick, so to speak?
I don't know if there was one that was like particularly more troublesome than any of the others. I think, doing Violet World was, I think, very exciting, because it's just like, it's the first one, you're sort of like trying to establish like what your general like rules and guidelines are, sort of like figuring it out. So I think that was one of the most exciting ones in that way. And then I think, just each one presents its own unique challenges, as far as like making it feel unique, having the right things in the environment, and, just making sure that there's enough there in each area.
Yeah. I got a question for John. I'm going to let him answer this question in chat. How many different colored worlds are there in total?
There's 6.
6. 6 worlds.
I'll say, for your last question, I think, not that I'm like doing the art, but something I noticed is actually there's a green world, I guess spoilers for Run and Jump. There's a green colored world, and that one's that I noticed is kind of tricky because the character is white, and then we color his outline based on the world you're in, and so when his body is white and then his outline is green, it actually kind of makes like the outlines a little fuzzier, and it kind of obscures his shape a little bit, especially when the character's moving really fast. So I guess just finding, like, honing in the right level of contrast where it looks like the right shade of green, but you can still discern all like the arms and the limbs and everything as the character's moving.
Sure.
It's something I'd get in there and kind of try and tweak with things, but yeah, that can be a tricky thing to get correct about something like this. And actually, Phil, that kind of, was it? Did you find it like tricky or like hard to work with kind of the nature of these worlds, like being kind of as mono-colored as they are?
It was interesting. I think, as long as we stayed sort of in the family, I thought that was sort of interesting. Like you see that, we in the Violet world, we are still using some blues and some things like that, where it's like, but we don't try to make those the focus, where it's like those things are sort of an accent, or they're like in the background, right? Like there's a couple blue layers of the clouds in the background. And that was one thing where originally the enemies were not the contrasting colors that they are now, which was a decision that we made, like John was talking about, for gameplay reasons, to sort of help highlight and distinguish those, make them easier to identify whenever you're moving quickly through the environment. So the enemies used to be that more like tertiary color. So I think in Violet World they might have been the same outline as the player, but they were more in that color family, whereas now they're outside of that, call a little more attention to themselves.
Yeah. So looking at this skulking here, I do remember earlier that it didn't pop, and it also didn't feel as threatening, right? So we're kind of trying to control the color palette a bit and make sure this looks like something that'll cause murder. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the special effects. When I've shown the game to people, they look at it and go, whoa, this is like a neon wonderland. It is a glowy paradise. The post-processing and all kind of the visual effects do really well, but there's also a lot of like set trimming and stuff here. Also, if I get into a scene like this one, we've got like these particle waves in the background and these small, we'll call them petals, that are blowing across the front of the game. Talk about that development process, Phil, because there's such a thing as having too much of that, but I think you balanced it really well. We've got these foreground elements, they're all wavy. How do those get produced? How'd you come across or develop that process?
Yeah, so that's just there's a lot of combination of particle systems and shaders going on. So a lot of those like pulsating or waving effects, those are all accomplished through shaders, and then sort of like the things that are actually in the environment, like the petals, flying through the foreground and the background, and also out from the character's feet. Those are the particle systems that are in action. So I think just trying to work in a scene, right? Run around with it and see how things feel, making sure that it's not too overwhelming, and that you still have something that's moving around in the environment, right? Like the game feels a lot different if we just strip all that out and it's just a empty black void in the background, whereas it feels more like a place whenever you sort of add that depth to the environment and you have those different layers of things that are moving around on your screen.
And kind of a general production question follow-up, when are you adding those things? If I'm a developer or an aspiring developer and I love games, but maybe I've done a few game jams and that sort of thing, when are you choosing to add these special effects, the little petals and the jump, well, I'll call them poofs, the petals in the background and all the trimmings? When are those getting added?
Yeah, so they come at different times, right? It depends on sort of where you are at in the process and how much time you have, like what's most important at the time. But I like to get as much of that stuff in as early as possible. I know there's a lot of people who say like wait to do that stuff. It's like polish, that you should work on at the end. But it's one of those things where it's like the more that you enjoy the game and the better it sort of feels, the more polish you can have early on, I think the more it's going to make you want to work on it. So I like to get those things in as early as possible. I mean, also, I think that it can influence the way that you make the game, because those things are such a big part of game feel and the player experience. So it can kind of influence design decisions to an extent, depending on what those effects are and how significant they are to the gameplay.
Sure. Well,
and there is just general production reasons to get some of that stuff in earlier rather than later, where, you know, we'll have a milestone that we hit, you know, with most projects is like the vertical slice. Whereas like ideally you have one of everything, right? So the vertical slice for a game like Mr. Run and Jump is like you have one complete level, or like complete level. Like it might not be a level we use in the final game, but it's something you'd start and end, and it shows like one enemy, and it has one of every mechanic and stuff like that. So and that's stuff that publishers and, you know, higher ups and the people with the money, you know, they want to see, like, you know, hey, what is this thing actually going to look like? But I recall, like, Phil, you had a lot of this stuff, yeah, like really early, like even our initial mock-ups, you know, were you know, very, very pretty and full of life in this way. And I think you've done a tremendous job, like, carrying that energy through, you know, to the final product.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we do a lot of like video, what would you call them? We're just taking clips, right? You're building this stuff in Unity a lot of the times, and we're just taking these clips and sharing them. And they may just be like something as simple as like, take out all the level geometry here, and it's just like the clouds and the petals and that background wave, and just sharing that with the team helps us. I'm speaking kind of to the viewers now. Helps us just get all on the same page. But something that you mentioned, Phil, that I hadn't really considered before, I think is correct, is the sooner you get the thing kind of looking good, it makes it more enjoyable to work on. Like it really does, I think, build some excitement among the team to see these really lovely visuals come to life. So yeah, I think there's something to it for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark here shortly, and that's usually where I start really fiending to do some speed running. But I wanted to maybe talk just a little bit about the interface or any of the auxiliary stuff, the logo, icons, things like that. Is there anything else that, as you were working on this game, Phil, stood out as an art task that, you know, you feel is important, is part of the process, but we haven't touched on it yet?
I mean, I think that there's some interesting things when we talk about some other stuff that we're just not getting into yet, as far as like the void and all that sort of stuff. Because that was one of the big things for this project. I spent a lot of time sort of tweaking those visual effects, doing a lot of shader deep dive stuff, as well as just that little sort of wave effect in the background with the different dots, which is something that's sort of universal to each world. So every world has like its own unique elements. They're not all clouds. They're sort of reflective of the environment that you're in, but they all sort of share that wavy matrix, I guess, of dots, which was really cool to try and figure out how to do that, because originally that was an effect that I had created in After Effects. So it was sort of trying to figure out how I was going to accomplish that within a completely different tool set. Was a really interesting challenge, because I knew exactly how I wanted it to look, and I had a reference. So it was interesting sort of taking that approach rather than like building inside of the engine first and using those tools.
Did you find that was like almost essential for that particular effect, like just to get a baseline first and then figure out how to work in the engine to that point? Or do you feel like now, you know, with what you've learned, you're like, oh, I could just get into the engine now? Or do you feel like it speeds up your process to previs in something like After Effects?
Yeah, I think depending on the complexity of what it is, for something like that, I think it was definitely much faster to do previs in After Effects, just because I'm not super, you know, experienced with creating shaders from scratch or anything like that. It's super deep technical process, and you can get into the weeds on that stuff. So I think in that instance, it was a big help just to sort of establish that and then have a goal to work towards, versus just like floundering around messing with different nodes and connecting them and trying to see what all they do and that sort of thing. But there's also validity in that, where whenever you are experimenting and doing strange things, like you can end up creating some really unique stuff.
Yeah. All right, so I have one more question, and then my brain is going to focus completely on Platinum Time. In terms of being an artist in games, is there a game out there where you're like, oh, the art style in that game is super amazing, and that I could motivate our loyal fans to be like, oh, we got to go get that team who made that game. They need to see Run and Jump. Like, what would be the coolest team where if they were like, yo, Run and Jump's looking pretty fly, what would that team be for you, or what would that game be for you, Phil?
Oh, man. I don't know. I think one of the games that I've really enjoyed the art of the most recently was probably Cult of the Lamb.
Okay.
It kind of has that like almost like Paper Mario sort of like 2D images, but they're in like a 3D space. Really interesting, like super detailed illustration, and just like very, I don't know, it just has this like quality about it that's really nice. Reminds me kind of there's a similar style in like Swords of Ditto.
Okay.
That sort of hand-drawn style that's really nice. I enjoy it a lot. So
All right, well, I'm gonna say, hey, Cult of the Lamb, notice us. Phil loves you. Come look at Phil's art. I'll make that happen. I don't know the other one, Sword of Ditto. I don't know that one as much, so I can't just cold call those guys. All right, I'm gonna switch my brain into speed running mode if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. And here, maybe we'll take this opportunity to say, if you're enjoying the stream, Mr. Run and Jump is the Steam page is up. Feel free to go on there, check out the wish list button, give it a click, and see what happens. The answer might surprise you. Never know until you do it. So
It's true. So do it twice.
games also coming to PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, Epic Game Store, the Atari VCS. So if Steam is not your platform of choice, well, you know what? Just go there and wishlist it there anyway. And then when it goes on sale, you know, Steam will email you, and then you'll be like, "Oh, okay, I can get this on PlayStation or whatever." You know.
They email you when things are on sale, items on your wish list. I've never gotten one
Yeah,
of those.
you could probably turn that off, but yeah, I'll get stuff like, "Hey, that thing you wishlisted is on sale now. Check it out."
Well, I'm being very facetious there. I get, anytime the Steam summer sale comes up, I get that email like a million times.
Oh,
That,
gotcha.
and I already own Dead Cells, but gosh darn it, Steam really, really, really wants me to know that Dead Cells is on sale. And boom, check that time.
Ooh,
Here we go.
what is it? I can't quite see.
59.36. Sub 1 minute.
Sub one.
Platinum.
Wow.
He's been practicing.
Clearly.
And there was a lot of air both in my conversation and in that run. So that was yeah, that one there's some room. There's some room. Are you ready? Here we go. We going again. Oh,
Have
nope.
you?
That's not the one.
I was just gonna ask. Have you, like, from that run? Do you feel like you know where you can do better?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I've speedrunned 2 games significantly. One is Ninja Gaiden for the NES, and the other is, you'll never guess it. I could give you 1,000 guesses and you'll never guess it.
Oh, please, you gotta let me guess though.
Yeah, I'll give you. You just keep saying words and I'll speedrun. You're never gonna get it.
Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
No.
Multiwinia.
No. People in chat, you gotta help them out, because nobody, and I mean nobody, is gonna get this one. It's not like an obscure game. It's not like some weird prototype that's never existed. It is a very popular game. Make
Angry
5
Birds.
Angry Birds. Yeah. Doodle Jump. I tell you what, guess 5 total times, and then I'll tell you the platform.
Okay.
That'll help narrow it down.
it's not like one of your usuals like Heroes of Might and Magic, right?
No. This is a terrible run. It is not Super Mario Galaxy. It is not Pac-Man. Rob Santos. Night Trap.
Night Trap.
Yeah, you don't want to be looking up my top times on Night Trap. It is
Well,
not.
you just run to the part where the girls show up, and then it slows way down, right?
I've seen 3 screenshots of Night Trap total in my life. Like, that game could be a total lie to the universe, and everybody is just in on the joke but me, and I've never actually seen the thing in real life. So no, it is not Night Trap. I think that's 5 guesses, and this run is absolute trash. So,
God of War 2?
the platform is the Nintendo 64.
Huh.
That is John's weakness.
I know. I don't know. I don't
Is
know.
it
Mystical
Star
Ninja
Fox?
Not Star Fox. It is a big franchise on the Nintendo 64. It is not Ocarina of Time.
Did anyone say Super Mario 64?
No, but it's not that one either. I like that guess. Ocarina is pretty popular as a speed run, so that's a good guess too. Ocarina's got a lot of glitch though. This one is not like, it's not like a glitch speed run on this game. It's just legit speed. And some
Something
trivia.
with frogs.
Nope. Trivia that will help absolutely no one guess this right is, at one point I did attempt to pitch a version of this game to the people that own the franchise. It is not Battletoads, it is not Metroid.
Oh man.
I wrote about it and was published about this game this year. I was published in a hardback book talking about this game.
I feel like I'm in an alternate dimension. I had no idea.
Oh, Brad. Boust
Wave
528 gets it.
Wave
Wow.
Race 64.
Dude, Wave Race, I'm telling you, I would speedrun Wave Race with such neurotic attention that I would start and like you'd hear like the beeps ding ding go, and then like I'd hit the button, and if I didn't see the right sploof on the wave, I was like, this run sucks, I'm starting over. My hands hurt so bad, and all I could hear in my head was the beep beep go, and you know, start your engines and all this stuff if you played Wave Race. And it was just like, there's so, like, the physics of that game are so wild that, like, I mean, there's nothing dependable about it at all. Like, it's such a dumb one to speedrun. But man, love that game. Wave Race 64.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So whatever happened with that? You said you pitched on a new Wave Race game?
We were in the pitch process. Yeah, I mean, I loved it as an idea, and God, it would have been on the Wii, I guess, because that was the platform we were working on at the time. And they had Blue Storm on GameCube, and it kind of did okay, but not good enough to like give it attention. So it didn't go anywhere. But we were motivating to look at that title. Yeah, we didn't really have the pedigree for it. Like, we didn't have the background in the physics and other stuff. Yeah. So is that, and I've always loved Kid Icarus, and I always feel like that franchise could use just, you know, people making cool things with that brand. But so that was pre-Uprising that I was looking at Kid Icarus. But all right, this run has got some potential, so I'm gonna shut up. I think we're gonna be hitting 57, 58.
Ooh.
58. Not bad.
So I'm seeing all these 1-1 speed runs, but where's the 1-2 at?
It's not important. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about 1.2. 1-1 is where it's at. Anybody shows me a sub 50 on 1-1 coming up, you know, when the game launches, and I will send you a coupon for a cheeseburger. I lost John immediately.
Oh man.
Cheeseburger, man. Delicious. Everybody likes cheeseburger.
I don't contest this.
Oh, that run's terrible. No way I'm getting a 57 with that kind of garbage.
You know, no one's gonna send you any coupons with that performance.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna go hungry. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go hungry. No cheeseburgers for you. Oh, that's terrible. You gotta have a good room 1. You can't just be running into walls and expect to get a cheeseburger.
Are you keeping like an eye on the timer, like as you like transition between rooms to be like, oh, this is a 640. I need this to be a 630.
I will. I haven't yet for 1-1, but I definitely will once I get more serious about it. Yeah.
Okay.
There's like a room. It's like the 3rd or 4th room, I think, and it's like if you're not at like 11 seconds by the time you get to that room, then normally it's not a very good run. I feel like.
There are some benchmarks, but you can't keep looking at the clock and do good at all. So for games like Ninja Gaiden, there are these like transitionary rooms where the game is stopped, right? So you can look at a clock and see where you're at, but but this game just too fast. Can't look at the clock. I guess there's like, there's little transitionary screens, I guess, but I can't do that and talk and, you know. Oh gosh, that was slow.
Spinning too many plates.
And think about cheeseburgers all at the same time. Oh, that was a good transition. A little sloppy. Sloppy on the dismount. Height. Ooh, that was a good one. That was a bad one.
I can't. When I get to that room, I can't resist the urge to wall jump there. I think that's usually my problem. I can get like 1 minute times on this level, but I think I always just kind of wall jump in that room, and it winds up eating up a lot of time.
Oh, this is gonna be
it's getting there. Oh no!
Oh man.
ugly.
Are you still pretty good?
Oh, imagine that could have been a 56, Matt. That was the one.
Oh man.
From chat,
Still
how are you gonna
platinum
get it to them? Mail them a Big Mac. I said a cheeseburger, not a Big Mac. That is like that's like a $5 difference. I ain't made of money over here. Not until the launch of Mr. Run and Jump, where that was sloppy. Come on, Matt. Good transition.
Terrible.
I feel like the next game is going to need some sort of cheeseburger Easter egg in it.
Instead of a platinum orb, it gets you a little.
It gets you a single, a double, and a triple cheeseburger.
I'm a fan.
Because this is a coupon for 1 cheeseburger.
Phil, my art friend, can you make me a cheeseburger and Mr. Run and Jump?
I mean, that'd be pretty good. Instead of like the world being based on colors or based on like fast food items. So you go to you start in like soft drink realm, and then you go to the fry realm, and then you go, the final one is the cheeseburger realm, and there you go.
All right, this is the last one of this stream. We got 60 seconds left. Come on, Mr. Run Jump, get loose. Here we. Oops, I missed it.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. Come on, Matt. Leap, jump, dash, jump, bad, terrible, garbage.
Oh man, 690 on that leap. Already off to a bad start.
Leap. Shh. Quiet down.
12 seconds, man.
Jump, dash, jump. Jump up and over and terrible and terrible.
Close one. Oh.
And terrible.
Not bad.
This
No,
is
that's
sloppy.
good.
Leap and dash. Sloppy.
Uh-oh.
Sloppy. Terrible garbage. Come on, show.
Oh, baby. It's getting close.
Ooh, that was a good transition. Ugly.
Oh, no!
No.
The pressure.
Oh, man.
We do one more. It's still
Don't
6
think
o'clock.
you do it.
technically.
The suspense once you get to like the
That was
3/4
clean.
mark.
Oh, that was clean.
Ooh, 6:30. That was good. It was a good time for that room.
All right, we're going
Ooh,
under.
8:43.
Ugly,
That's really
ugly.
good.
No.
Oh,
no.
wrong way.
Oh.
We do one more. It's still 6 o'clock. Run. Run, Mr. Run and Jump. Go. Go, go. Jump, jump, go. Ooh, it's clean. 6-2. I'm sweating here. Is anybody else sweating on this stream? It's like 1,000 degrees. Dash, dash. Get the, oh, I didn't get the dash.
Oh, and it's 6:01. Can't restart.
Guys, it's been good sitting on the stream with you. Phil, thanks for joining. It's good to get a kind of a behind the scenes from you. We'll have other streams coming up where we may actually break apart the assets and dig into the engine a little bit, and I think it'd be good to have you back on.
Totally.
Thanks to everybody that joined us on the stream. We will be back here. Same jump time, same jump channel, 5 o'clock Central next Friday. And we have a surprise for you next Friday. So what you got, John? You have something?
Follow Graphite Lab on
Please.
Twitch, or keep up to date on when we stream and all that. We're on all the social medias. We have Graphite Lab accounts on Twitter. On do we have like an Instagram? Like
We do.
We've got a Facebook
At Graphite Lab, anywhere that socials are sold. And Phil, how can people follow you if they want to see more sweet arts?
Oh, you can follow me on Twitter at Phil Snowman. I don't really post there though, so it might be a while before you get anything. But also, if you want a fun game to play in the meantime while you're waiting for Mr. Run and Jump to come out, go play Combinera.
Please play Combinera, and no cheeseburgers, but you'll have our thanks. All right, everybody, that's it from us.
Is for who to raid, guys?
Any preference for who to raid? We do have to pop into somebody, preferably somebody with cheeseburgers. But if we can't, who do we got in chat? Somebody volunteer. We need somebody to send our energy to. Rob, Baust, Kyle, Bluehound. Any of you have raid suggestions? Otherwise, we will defer to our executive producer, who always reminds me that we have to ask this question, and I always forget. We could pop into our old buddy from last time, but I don't know where I remember who that was. Not live. All right. Bluehound says, I don't know Twitch folk too well. I'm learning. I'm meeting new Twitch folk. That's how we do this. It's okay, Bluehound. All right. REP's made a selection. This guy's wearing an Expos hat. Kind of into it. Oh my gosh, is he playing the Mario? Oh, he's a Francais. Oh, well, that makes sense because he's got an Expos hat. He's up there in
Montreal.
Montreal.
Yeah,
Oh, where's
it's a big
Nico?
throwback.
Where's Nico when we need him?
Is Nico from Montreal?
No, but he knows French.
Really?
Royale with
Awesome.
cheese.
Oui, oui.
Oui, oui. I could have totally broken 55 seconds by now. Mr. Run and Jump.
You can get in another couple runs while we figure out who to raid.
Maybe just one. Oh, I think we got it. Nope. You'll have to tune in next week. Because I'm feeling it. I'm feeling in my run and jump fitness. All right, we're raiding, folk. Three, two, 1 now.
The anticipation.
The anticipation.
It's killing me.
Are we good? Are we still live? What's happening?
I don't usually ask questions. Cat looks busy, and so I'm not asking any questions right now. But it did say that we rated a bunch of people, and